Hey everyone, how's it going? In this video, we're going to do some examples involving the different types of numbers. Before we begin, let's just quickly run through the different types of numbers that we learned in the previous video. The most specific category we have are the natural numbers. Now, the natural numbers are things like 1, 5, or 15. They're non-fractional numbers, and they don't include zeros or negatives. The next group after that are the whole numbers. Whole numbers take it one step further, and they include 0 now. So we can have 0, 2, 27, anything like that. But once again, no fractions and no negatives. After that, we have integers. And integers are where we start including our negatives. So we can have negative 55, 0, 99, etc. But still no fractions. Above that, we have the rational numbers. Rational numbers are where we can start introducing fractions. So, for example, I can have a negative number like negative 16. I can have 0. I can have 2/3. I can have 150. Now, you might be thinking, well, all of these categories I can write as a fraction, right? So, for example, if I have the number 2, well, that's just 2 over 1. Well, what makes rational different is that, for example, 2/3, that can't be simplified into a single number. So that's why I consider these numbers that can be written as fractions as opposed to these, because these can technically just be simplified. Now, the opposite of rational are irrational numbers. And these are numbers that can't be written as a simple fraction. And quintessential examples that you'll see are pi, root 2, root 3, things like that. And an easy way to identify an irrational decimal is a decimal that's infinite and it has no repeating segments, so there's no pattern to it. So knowing this, let's kind of run through these examples. So first we have a true or false problem. An integer is a rational number. Well, let's take a look at what an integer is. Integers are positive, negative, or 0, and no fractions. And now, what's a rational number? A rational number is also negative, 0, or positive, but they can be fractions. So we just have to see, does every rational number have to be a decimal? Well, no, it doesn't. And if we just take the group of rational numbers that aren't decimals, we have the integers. So this is true. Integers can be rational numbers. Or not can, they are rational numbers. Now let's look at the flip side of that. A rational number is an integer. Well, we just said that rational numbers can be fractions, but integers can't have fractions. At least not fractions that can't be simplified. So this is false. Now let's move forward to some classifications. We have 0.45. Let's start from the most specific and work our way down. So natural numbers can't be a decimal, so it's out. Whole numbers can't be a decimal. Integers can't be a decimal. So now we're between rational and irrational. So 0.45 is not an infinitely repeating decimal, so that means it's rational. Now, that should say 3.14, blah, 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 and then it should just go on forever, so forget that piece of it right there. This fraction, this decimal, it's a decimal, so it's not natural, whole, or an integer. And now between rational and irrational. Well, it's an infinite decimal, and now we just have to see, are there any repeating segments in it? It doesn't look like there is, so that means this is irrational. Now we have 5/3. 5/3, that's a fraction, so it's not natural, whole, or an integer. And is it rational or irrational? Well, Remember, to distinguish between rational and irrational, it just has to be able to be written as a fraction, and 5/3 is a fraction, so it makes it rational. Now we have square root of 81. Well, what is the square root of 81? That's just 9. So, is 9 a natural number? Well, is 9 a positive whole number? Yeah. So, it's natural. Is 9 a whole number, as in, is it either 0 or a non-decimal positive number? Yeah. So, it's a whole number. Is it an integer? Yes. Is it rational or irrational? Well, let's think back. 9 can be written as a fraction. That's just 9 over 1. So it's rational. So you see a number like 9 actually fits into a bunch of categories. Now we have root 2. So root 2 it's some decimal. And because it's a decimal, it's not natural, whole, or an integer. And root 2, like I mentioned over here, is one of those numbers that you come across that's really often used to describe an irrational number. So this is irrational. So those are a few examples explaining how to do some problems and identifying the different number types. I hope it helped, and as always, happy studying.